Norwegian folktales and fairy tales. I have to explain why I have picked Norway. I have recently just binged and finished the programme Vikings. I love it. It's genuinely one of the best things I have ever watched. I am very upset that it's over. I became very attached to the majority of the characters in that programme, and I still dream about them. I miss them so much. It's such a good programme. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. I put it off for so long, and now that we have watched it, I really want to just watch it all over again. It's incredible. My family on my mother's side is actually derived from Vikings up in Orkney, so it was really interesting to watch. It's quite factually correct in terms of the timeline, so unbelievable, so good. So that being said, I'm going to carry on my obsession with Norwegian and Scandinavian stories and read a few numbers from the book called East of the Sun and West of the Moon. This book contains 15 Norwegian folk tales. It's written, oh my goodness, by Peter Kristen Abjornsen and Jorgen Engebretsen Mo. I murdered that. It's unknown when it's published, but it appears very old. The first story I will read from this is the title story, East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Once upon a time, there was a poor husbandman who had so many children that he hadn't much of either food or clothing to give them. Pretty children they were all were, but the prettiest was the youngest daughter, who was so lovely there was no end to her loveliness. So one day, 'twas on a Thursday evening late at the fall of the year, the weather was so wild and rough outside, and it was so cruelly dark, and rain fell and wind blew, till the walls of the cottage shook again. There they all sat round the fire, busy with this thing and that. But just then, all at once, something gave it 3 taps on the window pane. Then the father went out to see what was the matter, and when he got out of the doors, what should he see but a great big white bear. "Good evening to you," said the white bear. "The same to you," said the man. "Will you give me your youngest daughter? If you will, I will make you as rich as you are now poor," said the bear. Well, the man would not at all be sorry to be so rich, but still he thought he must have a bit of a talk with his daughter first. So he went in and told them how there was a great white bear waiting outside, who had given his word to make them so rich if he could only have the youngest daughter. The lassie said no outright. Nothing could get her to say anything else, so the man went out and settled it with the white bear that he should come again the next Thursday evening and get an answer. Meanwhile, he talked his daughter over and kept on telling her of all the riches they would get, and how well off she would be herself, and so at last she thought better of it, made herself as smart as she could, and was ready to start. I can't say her packing gave her much trouble. "Well, mind and hold tight by my shaggy coat, and then there's nothing to fear," said the bear. So she rode a long way. Next Thursday evening came the white bear to fetch her, and she got upon his back with her bundle, and off they went. So when they had gone a bit of the way, the white bear said, "Are you afraid?" No, she wasn't. "Well, mind and hold tight by my shaggy coat," said the bear, "and there's nothing to fear." There was a bed made as fair and white as anyone would wish to sleep in, with silken pillows and curtains and gold fringe. All that was in the room was gold or silver, but when she had gone to bed and put out the light, a man came and laid himself alongside her. That was the white bear, who threw off his beast shape at night, but she never saw him, for he always came after she had put out the light, and before the day dawned, he was up and off again. So things went on happily for a while, but at last she began to get silent and sorrowful, for there she went about all day alone, and she longed to go home to see her father and mother and brothers and sisters. So one day, when the white bear asked what it was that she lacked, she said it was dull and lonely there, and how she longed to go home to see her father and mother and brothers and sisters, and that was why she was so sad and sorrowful, because she couldn't get to see them. Well, well, said the bear, perhaps there is a cure for all of this, but you must promise me one thing, not to talk alone with your mother, but only when the rest are by to hear, for she'll take you by the hand and try to lead you into a room alone to talk. But you must mind and not do that, else you'll bring bad luck on both of us. So one Sunday the white bear came and said, now they could set off to see her father and mother. Well, off they started, she sitting on his back, and they went far and long. At last they came to a grand house, and their brothers and sisters were running about, out of doors, at play, and everything was so pretty, 'twas a joy to see. There is where your father and mother live now, said the white bear, but don't forget what I told you, else you'll make us both unlucky. No, bless her, she'd not forget, and when she reached the house, the white bear turned right about and left her. Then, when she went in to see her father and mother, there was such joy, there was no end to it. None of them thought they could thank her enough for all she had done for them. Now they had everything they wished, as good could be, and they all wanted to know how she got on where she lived. Well, she said, it was very good to live where she did. She had all she wished. What she said beside, I don't know, but I don't think any of them had the right end of the stick, or that they got much out of her. But so, in the afternoon, after they had done dinner, all happened as the white bear had said. Her mother wanted to talk to her alone in her bedroom, but she minded what the white bear had said and wouldn't go upstairs. Oh, what we have to talk about will keep, she said, and put her mother off. But somehow or other her mother got round her at last, and she had to tell her the whole story. So she said how every night when she had gone to bed, a man came down and lay beside her as soon as she put out the light, and how she never saw him, because he was always up and away before the morning dawned, and how she went about woeful and sorrowing, for she thought she should like to see him, and how all day long she walked about there alone, and how dull and dreary and lonesome it was. My, her mother said, it may well be a troll that you slept with, but now I'll teach you a lesson how to set eyes on him. I'll give you a bit of a candle, which you can carry home in your bosom. Just light that while he is asleep, but take care not to drop the tallow was the old story over again. There came a man and lay down beside her, but at the dead of night, when she heard he slept, she got up and struck a light, lit the candle, and let the light shine on him. And so she saw that he was the loveliest prince one ever set eyes on, and she fell so deep in love with him on the spot that she thought she couldn't live if she didn't give him a kiss there and then. And so she did, but as she kissed him, she dropped 3 hot drops of tallow on his shirt, and he woke up. "What have you done?" he cried. "Now you have made us both unlucky, for had you held out only this 1 year, I had been freed. For I have a stepmother who has bewitched me, so that I am a white bear by day, and a man by night. But now all ties are snapped between us. Now I must set off from you to her. She lives in a castle which stands east of the sun and west of the moon, and there too is a princess, with a nose 3 ells long, and she's the wife I must have now." She wept and took it ill, but there was no help for it. Go he must. Then she asked if he mightn't go with him. No, she mightn't. "Tell me the way then," she said, "and I'll search you out. That surely I may get leave to do." Yes, she might do that, he said, but there was no way to that place. It lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and thither she'd never find her way. So next morning, when she woke up, both prince and castle were gone, and then she lay on a little green patch in the midst of the gloomy thick wood, and by her side lay the same bundle of rags she had brought with her from her old home. So when she rubbed the sleep out of her eyes and wept till she was tired, she set out on her way and walked many, many days, till she came to a lofty crag. Under it sat an old hag, and played with a gold apple which she tossed about. Here the lassie asked if she knew the way to the prince, who lived with his stepmother in the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and who was to marry the princess with a nose 3 ells long. "How did you come to know about him?" asked the old hag. "But maybe you are the lassie who ought to have had him." Yes, she was. So it is you, isn't it?" said the old hag. "Well, all I know about him is that he lives in the castle that lies east of the sun and west of the moon, and thither you'll come, late or never, but still you may have the loan of my horse, and on him you can ride to my next neighbour. Maybe she'll be able to tell you, and when you get there, just give the horse a switch under the left ear, and beg him to be off home, and stay, this gold apple you may take with you." So she got upon the horse and rode a long, long time, until she came to another crag, under which sat another old hag with a gold carding comb. Here the lassie asked if she knew the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and she answered, like the first old hag, that she knew nothing about it, except that it was east of the sun and west of the moon. "And thither you'll come, late or never, but you shall have the loan of my horse to my next neighbour. Maybe she'll tell you all about it, and when you get there, just switch the horse under the left ear, and beg him to be off home." And this old hag gave her the golden carding comb. It might be she'd find some use for it, she said. So the lassie got up on the horse and rode a far, far way, and a weary time. And so at last she came to another great crag, under which sat another old hag, spinning with a golden spinning wheel. Her too she asked if she knew the way to the prince, and where the castle was that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. So it was the same thing over again. "Maybe it was you who ought to have the prince," said the old hag. Yes, it was. together they went into the west wind's house, and the east wind said the lassie he had brought was the one who ought to have had the prince who lived in the castle east of the wind and west of the moon. And so she had set out to seek him, and how he had come with her, and would be glad to know if the west wind knew how to get to the castle. Nay, said the west wind, so far I've never blown, but if you will, I'll go with you to our brother the south wind, for he's much stronger than either of us, and he's flapped his wings far and wide. Maybe he'll tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you to him. Yes, she got on his back, and so they travelled to the south wind, and weren't so very long on the way, I should think. When they got there, the west wind asked if he could tell her the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, for it was she who ought to have the prince who lived there. You don't say so. That's she, is it? Said the south wind. Well, I have blustered about in most places in my time, but so far have I never blown. But if you will, I'll take you to my brother, the north wind. He is the oldest and strongest of the whole lot of us, and if he don't know where it is, you'll never find anyone in the world to tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you thither. Yes, she got on his back, and away he went from his house at a fine rate. And this time too, she wasn't long on her way. So when they got to the north wind's house, he was so wild and cross, cold puffs came from him a long way off. Blast you both, what do you want? He roared out to them ever so far off, so that it struck them with an icy shiver. Well, said the south wind, you needn't be so foul-mouthed, for here I am, your brother, the south wind, and here is the lassie who ought to have the prince, who dwells in the castle that lies east of the sun and west of the moon. And now she wants to ask if you ever were there, and can tell her the way, for she would be so glad to find him again. Yes, I know well enough where it is, said the north wind. Once in my life I blew an aspen leaf thither, but I was so tired I couldn't blow a puff for ever so many days after. But if you really wish to go thither, and aren't afraid to come along with me, I'll take you on my back, and see if I can blow you thither. Yes, with all her heart, and must and would get thither if it were possible in any way. And as for fear, however madly he went, she wouldn't be at all afraid. Very well then, said the north wind, but you must sleep here tonight, for we must have the whole day before us, if we're to get thither at all. Early next morning the north wind woke up and puffed himself up, and blew himself out, and made himself so stout and big, 'twas gruesome to look at him. And so off they went up through the air, as if they would never stop till they got to the world's end. Down here below there was such a storm, it threw down long tracts of wood and many houses, and when it swept over the great sea, ships foundered by the hundreds. So they tore on and on, no one can believe how far they went, and all the while they still went over the sea, and the north wind got more and more weary, and so out of breath, he could scarce bring out a puff, and his wings drooped and drooped, till at last he sunk so low that the crests of the waves dashed over his heels. Are you afraid? Said the north wind. No, she wasn't, but they weren't very far from land, and the north wind had still so much strength left in him that he managed to throw her up on the shore under the windows of the castle, which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. But then he was so weak and worn out, he had to stay there and rest many days before he could get home again. Next morning the lassie sat down under the castle window and began to play with the gold apple, and the first person she saw was the long nose, who was to have the prince. What do you want? is it that you will sell it for? You may name your own price, said the princess. Well, if I may get to the prince who lives here and be with him tonight, you shall have it, said the lassie whom the north wind had brought. Yes, she might. That could be done. So the princess got the gold apple, but when the lassie came up to the prince's bedroom at night, he was fast asleep. She called him and shook him, and between whiles she wept sore, but all she could do, she couldn't wake him up. Next morning, as soon as day broke, came the princess with the long nose, and drove her out again. So in the daytime she sat in under the castle windows and began to card with her carding comb, and the same thing happened. The princess asked what she wanted for it, and she said it wasn't for sale for gold or money, but if she might get leave to go up to the prince and be with him that night, the princess should have it. But when she went up, she found him fast asleep again, and all she called, and all she shook and wept and prayed, she couldn't get any life into him. And as soon as the first grey peep of day came, then came the princess with the long nose, and chased her out again. So in the daytime the lassie sat down outside the castle window, and began to spin with her golden spinning wheel, and that too the princess with the long nose wanted to have. So she threw up the window and asked what she wanted for it. The lassie said, as she had twice before, it wasn't for sale for gold or money, but if she might go up to the prince who was there and be with him alone that night, she might have it. Yes, she might do that, and welcome. But now you must know there were some Christian folk who had been carried off thither, and they sat in their room, which was next to the prince. They had heard how a woman had been in there and wept and prayed, and called to him 2 nights running, and they told that to the prince. That evening, when the princess came with her sleepy drink, the prince made as if he drank, but threw it over his shoulder, for he could guess it was a sleepy drink. So when the lassie came in, she found the prince wide awake, and she told him the whole story, how she had come thither. Ah, said the prince, you've come just in the nick of time, for tomorrow is to be our wedding day. But now I won't have the long nose, and you're the only woman in the world who can set me free. I'll say I want to see what my wife is fit for, and beg her to wash the shirt which has 3 spots of tallow on it. She'll say yes, for she doesn't know 'tis you who put them there. But that's a work only for Christian folk, and not for such a pack of trolls, and so I'll say that I won't have any other bride than the woman who can wash them out, and ask you to do it. So there was a great joy and love between them all that night. But next day, when the wedding was to be, the prince said, first of all, I'd like to see what my bride is fit for. Yes, said the stepmother with all her heart. Well, said the prince, I've got a fine shirt which I'd like for my wedding shirt, but somehow or other it has got 3 spots of tallow on it, which I must have washed out, and I have sworn never to take any other bride than the woman who's able to do that. If she can't, she's not worth having. Well, that was no great thing, they said, and so they agreed. And she, with the long nose, began to wash away as hard as she could, but the more she rubbed and scrubbed, the bigger the spots got. Ah, said the old hag, her mother, you can't wash, let me try. But she hadn't long taken the shirt in her hand before it got far worse than ever, and with all her rubbing and wringing and scrubbing, the spots grew bigger and blacker and darker and uglier. Then all the other trolls began to wash, but the longer it lasted, the blacker and uglier the shirt grew, till at last it was as black all over as if it had been up the chimney. Ah, said the prince, you're none of you worth a straw, you can't wash. Why, there outside sits a beggar lassie. I'll be bound she knows how to wash better than the whole lot of you. Come in, as driven snow, and whiter still. Yes, you are the lassie for me, said the prince. At that, the old hag flew into such a rage she burst on the spot, and the princess with the long nose after her, and the whole pack of trolls after her. At least I've never heard a word about them since. As for the prince and princess, they set free all the poor Christian folk who had been carried off and shut up there, and they took with them all the silver and gold, and flitted away as far as they could from the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. Lovely. The second story I'm going to read is called The Three Billy Goats Gruff. Now, I remember this as a child, and I would be very interested to know if this is a sort of fairy tale story that is worldwide, or if it's just sort of here over in the UK. I remember when I was younger, I would go to a woodland park with my parents that used to have a little bridge, and me and my brothers would hide under it, and my parents would go over the bridge, and we would say some of the lines that are in the story. So if you remember the story, please let me know. But apparently it originates from a Norwegian folktale. Once upon a time, there were three billy goats who were to go up to the hillside to make themselves fat, and the name of all three was Gruff. On the way up was a bridge over a burn they had to cross, and under the bridge lived a great, ugly troll with eyes as big as saucers and a nose as long as a poker. So first of all came the youngest billy goat Gruff to cross the bridge. Trip, trap, went the bridge. Who's that tripping over my bridge? Roared the troll. Oh, it's only I, the tiniest billy goat Gruff, and I'm going up to the hillside to make myself fat, said the billy goat with such a small voice. Now I'm coming to gobble you up, said the troll. Oh no, pray don't take me, I'm too little, that I am, said the billy goat. Wait a bit till the second billy goat Gruff comes, he's much bigger. Well, be off with you, said the troll. A little while after, the second billy goat Gruff came to cross the bridge. Trip, trap, went the bridge. Who's that tripping over my bridge? Roared the troll. Oh, it's the second billy goat Gruff, and I'm going up to the hillside to make myself fat, said the billy goat, who hadn't such a small voice. Now I'm coming to gobble you up, said the troll. Oh no, don't take me. Wait till the big billy goat Gruff comes. He's much bigger. Very well, be off with you, said the troll. But just then up came the big billy goat Gruff. Trip, trap, went the bridge, for the billy goat was so heavy that the bridge creaked and groaned under him. Who's that tramping over my bridge? Roared the troll. It's I, the big billy goat Gruff, said the billy goat, who'd had an ugly, hoarse voice of his own. Now I'm coming to gobble you up, roared the troll. Well, come along, I've got 2 spears, and I'll poke your eyeballs out at your ears. I've got besides 2 curling stones, and I'll crush you to bits, body and bones. That was what the big billy goat said, and so he flew at the troll and poked his eyes out with his horns, and crushed him to bits, body and bones, and tossed him into the burn. And after that he went up to the hillside. There the billy goats got so fat they were scarce able to walk home, and if the fat hasn't fallen off them, why they're still fat. And so, snip, snap, snout, this tale's doled out. This is so nostalgic. I must have been about 8 when that memory was. The third story I'm going to read is called The Lassie and Her Godmother. Once upon a time, a poor couple lived far, far away in a great wood. The wife was brought to bed and had a pretty girl, but they were so poor they did not know how to get the babe christened, for they had no money to pay the parson's fees. So one day the father went out to see if he could find anyone who was willing to stand for the child and pay the fees. But though he walked about the whole day from one house to the other, and though all said they were willing to stand, no one thought himself bound to pay the fees. Now, when he was going home again, a lovely lady met him, dressed so fine, and she looked so thoroughly good and kind. She offered to get the babe christened, but after that she said she must keep it for her own. The husband answered he must first ask his wife what she wished to do, but when he got home and told his story, the wife said right out, no. Next day the man went out again, but no one would stand if they had to pay the fees, and though he begged and prayed, he could get no help. And again, as he went home towards evening, the same lovely lady met him, who looked so sweet and good, and she made him the same offer. So he told his wife again how he had fared, and this time she said if he couldn't get anyone to stand for his babe the next day, they must just let the lady have her way, since she seemed so kind and good. The third day the man went about, but he couldn't get anyone to stand, and so when, towards evening, he met the kind lady again, he gave his word she should have the baby, if she should only get him christened at the font. So next morning she came to the place where the man lived, followed by 2 men to stand godfathers, took the babe and carried it to church, and there it was christened. After that she took it to her own house, and there the little girl lived with her several years, and her foster mother was always kind and friendly to her. Now when the lassie had grown to be big enough to know right and wrong, her foster mother got ready to go on a journey. You have my leave, she said, to go all over the house, except those rooms which I shew you. And when she said that, away she went. But the lassie could not forbear just to open one of the doors a little bit, when, pop, out flew a star. When her foster mother came back, she was very vexed to find that the star had flown out, and she got very angry with her foster daughter and threatened to send her away, but the child cried and begged so hard that she got leave to stay. Now after a while, the foster mother had to go on another journey, and before she went, she forbade the lassie to go into those 2 rooms, into which she had never been. She promised to beware, but when she was left alone, she began to think and to wonder what there could be in the second room, and at last she could not help setting the door a little ajar, just to peep in, when, pop, out flew the moon. When her foster mother came home and found the moon let out, she was very downcast, and said to the lassie she must go away. She could not stay with her any longer. But the lassie wept so bitterly and prayed so heartily for forgiveness that this time too she got leave to stay. Some time after, the foster mother had to go away again, and she charged the lassie, who by this time was half grown up, most earnestly that she mustn't try to go into or peep into the 3rd room. But when her foster mother had been gone some time, and the lassie was weary of walking about alone, all at once she thought, dear me, what fun it would be just to peep a little into that 3rd room. first sake. But when the bad thought came the second time, she could hold out no longer. Come what might, she must and would look into that room. So she just opened the door a tiny bit when, pop, out flew the sun. But when her foster mother came back and saw that the sun had flown away, she was cut to the heart and said, now there was no help for it. The lassie must and should go away. She couldn't hear of her staying any longer. Now the lassie cried her eyes out and begged and prayed so prettily, but it was all no good. Nay, but I must punish you, said her foster mother, but you may have your choice, either to be the loveliest woman in the world and not be able to speak, or to keep your speech and to be the ugliest of all women. But away from me you must go. And the lassie said, I would sooner be lovely. So she became all at once wondrous fair. But from that day forth she was dumb. So when she went away from her foster mother, she walked and wandered through a great, great wood. But the farther she went, the farther off the end seemed to be. So when the evening came on, she clomb up a tall tree, which grew over a spring, and there she made herself up to sleep that night. Close by lay a castle, and from that castle came early every morning a maid to draw water to make the prince's tea from the spring over which the lassie was sitting. So the maid looked down into the spring, saw the lovely face in the water, and thought it was her own. Then she flung away the pitcher and ran home. And when she got there, she tossed up her head and said, if I'm so pretty, I'm far too good to go and fetch water. So another maid had to go for the water, but the same thing happened to her. She went back and she said she was far too pretty and too good to fetch water from the spring for the prince. Then the prince went himself, for he had a mind to see what this all could mean. So when he reached the spring, he too saw the image in the water, but he looked up at once and became aware of the lovely lassie who sat up there in the tree. Then he coaxed her down and took her home, and at last made up his mind to have her for his queen, because she was so lovely. But his mother, who was still alive, was against it. She can't speak, she said, and maybe she's a wicked witch. But the prince could not be content till he got her. So after they had lived together for a while, the lassie was to have a child, and when the child came to be born, the prince set a strong watch about her. But at the birth, one and all fell into a deep sleep, and her foster mother came, cut the babe on its little finger, and smeared the queen's mouth with the blood, and said, now you shall be as grieved as I was when you let out the star. And with these words she carried off the babe. But when those who were on the watch woke, they thought the queen had eaten her own child, and the old queen was all for burning her alive. But the prince was so fond of her that at last he begged her off, but he had hard work to set her free. So the next time the young queen was to have a child, twice as strong a watch was set as the first time. But the same thing happened over again, only this time her foster mother said, now you shall be as grieved as I was when you let the moon out. And the queen begged and prayed and wept, for when her foster mother was there she could speak, but it was all no good. And now the old queen said she must be burnt, but the prince found means to beg her off. But when the third child was to be born, a watch was set 3 times as strong as the first. But just the same thing happened. Her foster mother came whilst the watch slept, took the babe, and cut its little finger and smeared the queen's mouth with the blood, telling her now she should be as grieved as she was when she let the sun out. And now the prince could not say have your speech. How glad the Queen and Prince now were, all may easily think, but no one can tell. After that, they were always happy, and from that day, even the Prince's mother was very fond of the young Queen. The fourth and final story I'll do for today is called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind. There is a running theme in this book with the stories. A lot of them are based around the wind. Once on a time there was an old widow who had one son, and as she was poorly and weak, her son had to go up into the safe to fetch meal for cooking. But when he got outside the safe and was just going down the steps, there came the north wind, puffing and blowing, caught up the meal, and so away went with it through the air. Then the lad went back into the safe for more, but when he came out again on the steps, if the north wind didn't come again and carry off the meal with a puff, and more than that, he did it so the third time. At this, the lad got very angry, and as he thought it hard that the north wind should behave so, he thought he'd just look him up and ask him to give him his meal. So off he went, but the way was long, and he walked and walked, but at last he came to the north wind's house. "Good day," said the lad, "and thank you for coming to see us yesterday." "Good day," answered the north wind, for his voice was loud and gruff, "and thank you for coming to see me. What do you want?" "Oh," answered the lad, "I only wish to ask you to be so good as to let me have back that meal you took from me on the safe steps, for we haven't much to live on, and if you're to go on snapping up the morsels we have, there'll be nothing for it but to starve." "I haven't got your meal," said the north wind, "but if you're in such need, I'll give you a cloth which will get you everything you want. If you only say cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes." With this the lad was well content, but as the way was so long, he couldn't get home in one day, so he turned into an inn on the way, and when they were going to sit down to supper, he laid the cloth on a table which stood in the corner and said, "Cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes." He had scarce said so before the cloth did as it was bid, and all who stood by thought it a fine thing, but most of all the landlady. So when all were fast asleep at the dead of night, she took the lad's cloth and put another in its stead, just like the one he had got from the north wind, but which couldn't do so much as serve up a bit of dry bread. So when the lad woke, he took his cloth and went off with it, and that day he got home to his mother. "Now," said he, "I've been to the north wind's house, and a good fellow he is, for he gave me a cloth, and when I only say it to it, 'Cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes,' I get any sort of food I please." "All very true, I dare say," said his mother, "but seeing is believing, and I shan't believe it till I see it." So the lad made haste, drew out a table, laid the cloth on it, and said, "Cloth, spread yourself and serve up all kinds of good dishes." But never a bit of dry bread did the cloth serve up. "Well," said the lad, "there's no help for it but to go to the north wind again," and away he went. So he came to where the north wind lived late in the afternoon. "Good evening," said the lad. "Good evening," said the north wind. "I want my rights for that meal of ours which you took," said the lad, "for it's the cloth that I got. It isn't worth a penny." "I've got no meal," said the wind, "but yonder you have a ram which coins nothing but golden ducats, as soon as you say to it, 'Ram, ram, make money.'" So the lad thought this a fine thing, but as it was too far to get home that day, he turned in for the night to the same inn was going to change the two, but just as the landlord was about to take it, the lad bawled out, "Stick, stick, lay on." So the stick began to beat the landlord till he jumped over the chairs and tables and benches and yelled and roared, oh my, bid the stick be still, else it will beat me to death, and you shall have back both your cloth and your ram." When the lad thought the landlord had had enough, he said, "Stick, stick, now stop." Then he took the cloth and put it into his pocket and went home with the stick in his hand, leading the ram by a cord round its horns, and so he got his rights